So let's talk about Bridget McKenzie. Now, the Auditor-General's report is really bad reading because the Auditor-General is not part of the lefty conspiracy. He's not part of the deep state, in my view. It is generally somebody who's going to turn around and say whether the right thing has happened or not. Now, I think if it had come out, say, during a parliamentary week, then there'd be almost no doubt about what was going to happen here. But are they able to maintain the rage and all the rest of it? And as I showed, when the media's trying to make great scandal out of the idea that $1 million went to an Olympic sport and sports facilities, I think that's a bit much. But the Nationals, well, despite the fact that there were some suggestions that she was towards the end of the plank, they're at least saying the right things. This is what Michelle Landry had to say saying that she has the support of the Nationals party room, and that she doesn't think that anyone wants to make any changes. I believe she will remain in that position. And as for Barnaby Joyce, who of course theoretically would be a beneficiary of one more spot for someone to go into the ministry, he says that he thinks that she will keep her job. And Richo, what's your sense here about, are we in the final days of McKenzie or the storm hath passed?
Well, I think the first point that I should make, is that back in, I think it was 1989, I did exactly the same thing, only better. I got into no trouble whatsoever, skated through, as I used to do on everything, and then the next year, Ros Kelly did the same thing and got herself into all manner of trouble. So as far as I'm concerned, on your Bridget.
Right.
I'm with you, love.
Well, despite that endorsement, do you think that that the walls are closing in, as some seem to suggest that it does? Or, I mean, there feels like if the PM wanted to make a swing, she would have swung before this week.
She's not going to swing.
Yeah.
I reckon that when you've got a thing like this, you move quickly or you don't move.
Yep.
And I think Morrison has shown no interest in moving, and I'd be very surprised if he does. That is, of course, also influenced by the fact that getting rid of a senior national is very touchy business for the coalition.
She's deputy leader.
So I'd say there's Buckley's of her being shifted, and as I said, I did exactly what she did once. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite and stand here and condemn her.
Would you like to give them tips on how to do it better?
Well, I did do it better, and I didn't get one person criticised me. The next year a minister got sacked for it. There you go.
It's because you didn't use a whiteboard. It was all up here. It was all up here. And until they can break in there...
all my life is you'll never, ever find a record. Yeah. It's always up here.
I love this, Richo. I love this. Ever since the birthday party,
it's actually that truth serum we tipped in earlier before.
This ain't water. This ain't water. Jenna, what's your sense here? Because, look, a couple of days ago, and certainly around the Auditor-General, it felt like this was heading in one direction. There was a story that the Channel 9 newspapers had about the gun membership, but then, again, if you're looking to defend or just looking for greater context, she didn't have to declare the membership because it was less than $300. She didn't pay for it. She was something that was offered to her after. And I got an interesting email from a lady who works in and around the clay target industry just last night, who said that the actual reason why the club got $36,000 for the toilets is because when she was visiting the club months earlier, raw sewage was coming out of the ladies' toilets. She obviously saw that to be the problem. They obviously made a complaint about it. She's decided to action on the money. That said, there are apparently people who are willing to speak to the media that they thought this thing was being done poorly, and being done poorly when they were working for her. What's your sense about this, Jenna?
I think it's quite disappointing because I remember dealing with Senator McKenzie when she was Sports Minister, and she was so enthusiastic for the portfolio. And I think it's really, really disappointing that this has all now come back to haunt her, because she was out on the hustings all of the time. She was always out at different events. She was at the Winter Olympics, and she would always be willing to give you a comment around anything, which is less we can say for the current Sports Minister. So if anything, I think next week will be quite intriguing to see what happens and whether she'll move next. But apparently a number of coalition MPs have told me that they're more focused on coronavirus right now than opposed to something to do with the National Party.
Now, Rowan, what's your sense of it?
Well, I just zoom out to the bigger picture, and the problem is we we give away far too much of taxpayers' money in grants.
Of course.
They can be arts grants, they can be sports grants, they can be all sorts of different things. We give away a fortune. The real scandal in this whole story is not Bridget McKenzie, it's how much money is given away by Labor and Liberal governments of the taxpayers' money to these various different bodies. Now, I think there's way too much money given. I think we should be slashing that dramatically. But anyway, but the problem is, if you're giving away all this money, Paul, who decides who gets it? And that's the thing. Now, there's only two ways of going. Either a politician, an elected politician, or in this case a senator, decides who's giving the money away, or a bureaucrat decides who gets the money. There's only two ways of doing it.
And even if it's a politician I don't like, I'll take the politician over the bureaucrat.
Well, exactly, because here we see a politician making that decision, and unless you have the skills of a rickshaw, there's always going to be someone saying, well, hang on, you gave it to favour your party or whatever. But allow the bureaucrats to make the decisions, which some people are advocating, and you get Yasmin Abdel Magid being given $20,000 to live in for 6 months on the left bank in Le Marais in Paris, swanning around on my money. And I fiercely object to that. Which is worse, the money going to the toilets to clean up the sewage, or the money going to pay for someone who loathes this country to sit around on our purse living it up in Paris? I'm sorry, don't let the bureaucrats... Get rid of them making the decisions, allow the politicians to make the decisions, but let's have less money for them to hand around, and let's be more rigorous with overseeing what their rules are, so they know their own rules.
You could have the Sports Commission do it, you know.
Yes, that is possible as well.
Where people know a bit about what they're talking about. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad idea, I don't think.
Would you think the same about Infrastructure Australia and these sorts of one-arm removed organisations?
Yeah, I think... they're very often the best way to hand out money, because provided, you know, that when they're chosen, the people that have been put on them are genuinely the right people and not just mates.
The point is,
well, that said, I mean, look, I know it's not being proposed, but I always think that I would love to see an Australian system that mirrors the American system far more, where there's couple of thousand appointments right across government that are relevant to the side that won the election, because otherwise you end up with a Gillian Triggs style scenario where at 5 minutes to midnight you stack it with as many as you possibly can, and then they end up being sort of ideological blocks to the replacement government. So to me, if there's some ability to have renewal built in to the electoral cycle, I think that would be fine too. Otherwise you end up with, you know, for want of a better term, sort of the deep state allegations that people who were left over from the other one drag their feet. Now,
the last days of the Gillard government, that they put in those expansive education policies,
yes,
and the NDIS,
yep,
right at the death, and it added something like 15 billion in one hit.
Yep.
And that's the kind of thing that governments can do that you've got to watch out for.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.